in the midst of this.
Hello, I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching Deep Dive on NewsX World. Today we are examining French President Emmanuel Macron's high-stakes visit to China as he seeks to rebalance trade relations, tackle the Ukraine crisis and navigate the complex economic and political landscape between Europe and Beijing. Stay with us as we unpack the details of this important diplomatic encounter. Now, on Thursday, December 4, of this year, French President Emmanuel Macron arrived in Beijing for a 3-day visit. This marks Macron's fourth official trip to China since taking office, underlining the country's significant role in his strategic, political, and economic agenda. Macron was accompanied by a large business delegation, including executives from Airbus, BNP Paribas, Schneider Electric, and Alstom. This visit is seen as a crucial effort to boost both French industry and address the worsening trade deficit between France and China. Now, during the meeting, Macron and Chinese President Xi Jinping discussed a range of issues, including geopolitical stability, economic rebalancing, and environmental sustainability. Both leaders stressed the importance of dialogue in the current global context. Macron reiterated his call for China's support in mediating an end to the war in Ukraine, a conflict that has major implications for European security and the international rule of law. Now, the economic ties between France and China have grown significantly over the years. In 2024, France's trade deficit with China reached 46 billion euros. China is France's seventh largest trading partner, importing a range of products, including aircraft parts, luxury cosmetics, and agricultural goods. While France exports services like aircraft and pharmaceuticals, the main Chinese exports to France include electrical equipment, machinery, and consumer goods. The European Union's goods trade deficit with China has increased almost 60% since 2019, compounding Europe's feeling of economic disadvantage. China's industrial overcapacity and state-subsidized exports have been a major point of contention. The European Union accuses China of unfair trade practices that put European companies at a disadvantage. The European Union, under pressure from industrial lobbies, recently imposed tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles. In response, Beijing has expanded tariffs on European exports, including cognac and pork products. Macron pushed for a rebalanced economic governance, calling for fairer trade rules in light of these pressing issues. Now, despite the frustration, China's leadership is keen to present itself as a reliable partner to Europe. President Xi Jinping used Macron's visit to announce new economic and cooperation deals, including a promise to increase funding for the green economy, AI, and nuclear energy. But the political reality of their relationship remains fraught. While commercial deals dominate the agenda, the war in Ukraine remains a key issue. Macron's push for China's support in brokering peace is part of a broader effort to engage major global powers in the search for a resolution. Both leaders have agreed on the importance of dialogue and negotiation, but the conflict's outcome remains uncertain, particularly given China's closer ties with Russia. Xi's statement on Ukraine revealed a tightrope walk. While China expressed support for peace efforts, Beijing has refused to condemn Russia's actions in Ukraine and continues to provide economic assistance to Moscow. Meanwhile, France's Macron had a different take. Listen in.
Nous devons continuer à nous mobiliser en faveur de la paix et de la stabilité dans le monde et de l'Ukraine, différentes régions du monde qui sont touchées par la guerre. La capacité que nous avons à œuvrer ensemble est déterminante.
Historically, the European Union's relationship with China has been marked by a combination of economic cooperation and political tension. The European Union has often sought to strike a balance between trade opportunities and criticizing China's human rights record and its alignment with Russia. The European Union's recognition of China as a systemic rival reflects a shift in Europe's approach to Beijing in the context of increasingly risky geopolitics. The historical distrust remains, particularly among European states that are skeptical of China's strategic intentions, especially after the war in Ukraine. For now, European leaders are left with a dilemma: how to navigate a fragile balance of economic cooperation and political conflict in an ever-changing global landscape. Joining us on this discussion is Collins Chong-Yu-Keat, who is a Foreign Affairs, Security and Strategy Analyst at University Malaya from Kuala Lumpur. Thank you for joining us in this discussion here at NewsX World. We appreciate you taking time out to speak to us. I'd like to begin with my first question to you. How significant do you think is Macron's visit for France's economic and trade relations with China, and what are the important deals that can come out of this?
Well, Macron is trying to carve out a French leadership role inside Europe, knowing that Europe is fragmented now. France's neighbors are weak. Germany is weak economically and politically. EU is fragmented, so France sees a vacuum. Beijing sees a vacuum too. So Beijing wanted to divide Europe further, and with these France new overtures, President Xi is trying to gain new leverage. But Macron also is aware of that. And Macron wants to fill the leadership vacuum in Europe. So this Beijing visit is not only diplomacy, it's positioning France as Europe's de facto negotiator with China. So looking at the economic exposure to China, Europe's economic exposure has been deepening, dangerous. And as you know, EU runs almost up to more than 300 billion or around 400 billion euro trade deficit with China. So and this coupled with this state back an overcapacity by China, sending cheap products, EVs, batteries, solar panels into Europe is a direct threat to Europe's industrial base. It's a direct threat also to France. So asking President Xi for more investments, it's not just about money coming in alone. It's a strategic attempt to force China into a more balanced and respected, reciprocal relationship with Europe, with France in particular. So France wants China to build inside Europe rather than just, bypass Europe. So by tying up geopolitics, by tying up the factor of Ukraine, France is essentially calling, Beijing to stop enabling Russia's war economy, and that China is no longer able to play to both sides, as both a peacemaker and a peace broker, and also at the same time providing this lifeline support to Russia. So Europe wants China to pressure Putin not to empower him, and Macron sees this as an opportunity also to give a message to Washington, to Trump, that Europe still has its own say and leverage, and that Europe, with France leadership, still has the capacity to pressure and to leverage on President Xi, also to play their part on the issue of Ukraine. So now that we have seen this new strategic maneuver by Macron, both for the interest of France and Europe, and as well as also as a message also to President Trump, that France is coming of age, and that not only Washington has the leverage to pressure Beijing, but France, on behalf of Europe, is increasingly having this capacity to play a higher, bargaining cards and chips with Beijing.
All right, Collins, I also want to ask you, how is France navigating its economic partnership with China amid the growing European Union distrust and tension over trade and geopolitical issues?
Well, we've seen how Macron has always been trying to exploit any openings that can bolster the security and interests of France, and having said that, also the ability to have this chain effects on the security of Europe as a whole by tying up the issue of Ukraine, as well as being firm on the stance of having a fairer economic ties and trade relationship with China. So if this is successful, then France will have this new leverage and newfound leadership and admiration among all European partners, that despite the disagreements on Ukraine, and despite the mounting pressure for Europe to push China to act further, France has managed to successfully balance the relationship with Beijing, not at the expense of European security, but also at the same time maintaining a fairer and more respected trade and economic partnership with China. knowing full well that all the while China's strategy has always been to exploit divisions in Europe and also treating Europe as an important fallback option with regards to the new tariff and trade war with Washington. So we can see that Macron is also well aware that Beijing will offer just enough to keep France close in terms of maintaining the economic or in terms of reaping the economic benefits of France to China, but not close enough to change China's underlying behavior in terms of, you can see that there won't be any major market opening, or there's no substantial shift in terms of industrial subsidies, or we won't see any kind of real efforts to distance China from Russia. So this won't happen overnight, but Macron is expected to push for stronger European trade defense posture, including higher tariffs, stricter anti-subsidy measures and all that. And of course, France under Macron will expect Beijing to respond accordingly, not with empty words, but with, deliverables that will be measurable and that will build more confidence in terms of in repairing the economic ties between France and China, but most importantly between Europe and China.
And Collins, how is Macron balancing his push for China's support on Ukraine with the European Union's concerns about China's alignment with Russia?
Well, we have seen now that the increasing wariness and concerns among European nations, and with regards to the new peace plan ironed out by both sides, by Washington and Moscow, and of course Europe has felt being increasingly sidelined, and of course now this is the perfect leverage for Macron to voice out Europe's concerns, and that now it is trying to also increase its own leverage and bargaining capacity with regards to the war in Ukraine, but not at the level of Washington with Moscow, but at the level of another viable option, which is to pressure Beijing and pressure President Xi to also play his part in terms of also putting more pressure on Putin. So we've seen how the context of Ukraine has always been at the major forefront, but not enough also to push for major change in terms of how France will push China in terms of economic rebalancing. This is an important issue to France, of course, and this is also an important issue for Europe as a whole, knowing that their security have been increasingly dependent upon the actions of Moscow in terms of the war in Ukraine and the future intent also to move in to Europe, but also at the same time to the need to safeguard the near-term economic lifeline and economic interests of Europe as a whole. This is an important aspect, parallel importance to France and to Europe, and hence we have seen how Macron has tried to balance that, to safeguard short-term interests in terms of economic capacity, but also at the same time to push Beijing to also play its part. If Beijing wants a much more fairer economic trade with France and Europe, then Beijing will also need to play a greater role in terms of having this moral authority and leadership at the global level to pressure Putin to tone down his actions in Ukraine. So it's not a zero-sum game here. So Macron is trying to seek the best of both ways for Beijing and France.
All right, I'd leave it at that, and thank you for sharing your observations and perspectives with us here at NewsX World, Collins. And viewers, that's a wrap on this edition of Deep Dive, but do stay tuned to NewsX World for more international news updates from around the world.